Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. For those of you who watch regularly, you can tell I'm in a different, quote, studio, unquote, this morning. I completely lost all of my email service yesterday. Kaput, gone, vanished. Anyway, thankfully I have this second computer as a backup service, and I'm doing my best with it. Be that as it may, thank you for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. I am sharing with you some thoughts in response to viewer requests for a thumbnail sketch of Covenant Eschatology. I've shared with you that we must focus on what eschatology is really all about. In the previous show, I shared with you how biblical eschatology is focused on overcoming the death of Adam, and how if we do not properly define the death of Adam, then our eschatology is completely wrong. And I shared with you that God told Adam in the garden, "In the day you eat, you will surely die." And as I've said, I'm absolutely amazed sometimes at the less than logical, less than textual, less than contextual attempts people make to define the death of Adam as physical death. Look, some people just simply deny that there's such a thing as spiritual death, separation from God, which is covenantal death. And I'm sorry, that's simply, flat, dead, pun intended, wrong. Well, I want you to notice that Paul said death reigned from Adam to Moses. Romans 5:14. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean that the death was overcome at Moses? No. Paul said the law, that is Moses, was added that the sin might abound. Well, sin equals death. Therefore, the law was added that death might abound. The awareness, the cognizance of sin. Now, wait a minute. Are we supposed to believe that it took the law of Moses to make man aware that he was going to die physically? No. The law was added to make man more fully cognizant of the horrible nature of separation from God. Now, let me remind you that Paul said, speaking of that very death, the same kind of death that Adam experienced. I was alive once, Paul said, without the law. But the commandment came, sin revived, and I died. Now, first of all, Paul very clearly was not talking about biological death because he had not died at some point in the past and been physically resurrected. If so, he was already, immortal, incorruptible, undefilable, right? The point of fact is that Paul is reiterating the story of Adam. Just like Adam was alive, the commandment came, sin revived, and he died. Paul said, I recapitulate the story of Adam in my own experience. And he was saying that Israel, and by the way, all mankind basically, alive, commandment came, sin revived, I died. So the story of covenant eschatology, since it was the law of Moses that exacerbated, compounded the awareness, magnified the problem, so much so that Paul could say that Torah itself was the ministration of death. 2 Corinthians 3:6. And remember right here in Romans chapter 7, I was alive without the law, the commandment came, sin revived, and I died. Well, what commandment was it? I had not known sin except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. That's Torah. So we have here a situation in which God, in His divine omniscience, in His divine sovereign plan, posited the problem of death under Torah. And he said that he would solve the problem of the death at the end of Torah. At the end of the law that was the ministration of death. This, therefore, is covenant eschatology. If God placed the curse of Adam, now it existed before Torah, but God took that curse, posited it under Torah, and said, I'm going to make the problem worse. I'm going to exacerbate it. I'm going to compound the awareness of it under Torah, but at the end of Torah, I'll solve the problem. Look at it like this. If Torah was the ministration of death, and the new covenant was the ministration of life, if the ministration of death was the ministration of the death of Adam, because remember, God took the death of Adam, placed it under Torah. So if Torah was the ministration of the death of Adam, and the new covenant was the covenant of the ministration of life, then what is that? What is the transference from death to life? What is being taken out of death and entered into life, if that's not resurrection? And remember, God took the death of Adam, placed it under Torah. To overcome the death that Torah compounded and exacerbated was to overcome the death of Adam. I don't care how you want to define it, by the way. So, if God placed the death of Adam under Torah, and as a result called Torah the ministration of death, but promised that there would be a new covenant which would be the ministration of life to overcome the death that he placed under Torah, this is truly covenant eschatology. The end of the law that was the ministration of death, the death of Adam. The end of that would be at the full arrival of the covenant of the ministration of life. In my next segment, I'm going to share with you how the second coming of Christ and the end of Torah, and thus resurrection, are unequivocally posited at the end of Torah. Hey, thanks for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We'll see you on the flip side. You have a great day.